Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Butterfly Effect podcast. We are nearing towards the end of our last stop journey. So, Jack has just finished chapter 6, and we're going to freshly react to the episode. So, as always, we'll just get right into it. Jack, what did you make of it? Quite a short one, this one, about half an hour gameplay.
It was, and again, we're sort of revisiting our issue of how they've decided to divide up these chapters because, like, over half of this is dedicated to Mina. Then yeah, about 5 minutes is dedicated to Donna, and then the rest is dedicated to John, which really isn't that much longer than Donna's chapter as well. So yeah, I mean, again, that's something that is a little bit amiss with me personally. In terms of the actual chapters themselves, I mean, should we just dive straight into them, like starting with Mina as per usual?
Yeah, of course. So, yeah. What happened in Mina's story?
Yeah. So it starts off with Mina, and she's clearly breaking into Amy's flat. Now, I remember just sort of refreshing the last episode. At this point, I was still sort of unsure whether it was Amy, because sort of the game, it made it seem as though like it sort of was Amy, like sort of Mina had this sort of sudden realization that it could be her. But I was thinking, is there a twist in the tale? Turns out there isn't. She's been following Mina for all this time, and you go into first person, and it's quite a cool little sequence actually. Definitely one of Mina's highlights throughout her story. You're going through Amy's apartment, and you're essentially looking for evidence that suggests that she has been on your tail this whole time. And you sort of find various things. And I suppose for time, mate, like, I don't know if it's important going forward, but apart from the email where you find out that sort of Hale, like your boss, has been getting her to follow you, I didn't read all of the things, like the newspaper articles and stuff like that, because I was like sort of conscious of trying to get the episode sort of done in time for us to record. So yeah, you essentially find out that Hale's been behind it as well. He seems to think that you've gone off the boil, that you've got sort of too many issues at home, and that's why sort of you sort of been investigated behind the scenes. And it's at this point that I feel like the science fictiony element of the story is really thrown in your face in Mina's, because there's been no real clues as to how it's going to tie in. But he just sort of goes, "Oh yeah, by the way, the portal's ready," and you're like, "Wait, what?" So you're then selected as a candidate, and you have this conversation with Dan, and you're like, "I'm really sorry, I'm gonna have to go." And that further worsens your relationship, because he's like, if you do it, consider us over, essentially. And of course, you have to go and do it. So you're then sort of dropped into this. I don't know. It almost looks like you're on in some sort of space facility, and I can only assume that this place is underground, because the environment that you're in changes so quickly. And the scene sort of culminates with Mina walking into what looks like this spacesuit, and then being lifted down on a crane into this mysterious green light that we've seen since the prologue, and obviously in Donna's chapter as well. And the whole purpose of it is for an extraction mission, which is quite nice actually, because it ties back to the beginning where this girl walked into it, and that's your mission essentially, to go and rescue her. So yeah, in terms of what my overall opinion of this is, I find it a bit jarring, as I said, that you're suddenly thrust this whole sort of sci-fi element into Mina's story. I did like the opening. where you're sort of going through Amy's flat. But nonetheless, I'd probably still say that Mina's chapter 5 was perhaps a bit stronger. That might be controversial, I don't know, but I'd say that's still a bit stronger for me.
Yeah, so I think it is incredible the how they divvied up this episode, how strong Mina's is for time. So it's half an hour, and I think Mina gets about 18 minutes of it, maybe even 20 actually, which goes to prove how much how little the others got. But yeah, I guess I quite like the sequence. I do agree her last one was probably a bit stronger because you see more characters. If you think about it, this one's very much breaking through a flat, well, which takes up the majority of it, calling Dan, and then the conversation with Hale before you go through the portal. I quite like the breaking in part. It's really interesting to see more about Amy as well. Even little fine details such as the fact that she's got a packet of cigarettes on her table that Jack previously mentions that, you know, she's secretly a smoker. Uh, Little details as well, such as when you open all the drawers and there's all the what are clearly supposed to be famous DVDs and films. I think you see
Yeah,
Spirited Away, I think La La Land and Kill Bill, what you know, like are some of them. I think
yeah,
Forrest
and
Gump
Jurassic
might be one
Park.
as well, actually.
Yeah, like there's quite a few in there. Like the ones I definitely spotted were Kill Bill and Jurassic Park.
Oh yeah, there was Jurassic Park, wasn't there? Yeah, of course. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. So you mentioned that you didn't read all of it. Now, obviously, I played it a while ago. I think the main things you have to pick up on is just more evidence of the fact that Amy's been following you, and I think that Hale's in on it. Your performance has been slacking, and I think you know there is. I don't know if Amy's reviewing you or chasing you kind of as a performance review, but they're kind of thinking of muscling you out and putting Amy in instead. Um, what I didn't like about this sequence is the fact that you can choose to take evidence or leave it there. Now, the only thing it leads to is a trophy if you put everything back in place in the apartments as if it was untouched, for like a perfect criminal trophy. But I thought taking evidence would have relevance later on, and I might be wrong, but I don't think it does. So I just felt a bit cheated out of that. But yeah, no, a fairly good sequence as well. You know, shuffling around Amy's room. I think she knows about the affair as well with you and Felix. Obviously, she leaves the note, but she has the origin text. How she got that, I don't know, but I guess, you know, they're kind of CIA type people. There's, you know, probably an easy way to make up how that happened. But yeah, obviously, you've got the sequence afterwards with Dan and going through the portal. So each chapter here will end in the characters going through a portal to get to the final sequence. Uh, the biggest probably reveal about this is Hale. He is your boss throughout the entire Mina story, and then uh, there's a little bit of a twist. I can't remember how it comes about. I think it's done in quite a subtle manner. But he's Peter at the start of the game. Is this something you picked up on, or you would have guessed at all?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, I'd probably go as far as to say that, like, you revealing that to me is literally sort of brand new information. So, yeah, the fact that. But then I think, yeah, sort of think about the police officers' uniforms at the start, perhaps were sort of more, yeah, sort of more oldie worldy uniforms compared to Emma's. So, yeah, I suppose that's a subtle hint that what we're watching at the beginning something in the past. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, like I said, mate, like I wasn't paying too much attention. Like I was sort of wanting to get it done and whatnot. But yeah, like that's pretty good actually. So he presumably gets carried off by the police, but he somehow manages to climb his way up in this like military sort of specialist company with all this tech and stuff, which is it's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes you realize that Mina's whole mission is to basically retrieve Sam, the girl from the start. Now, I don't know if the performance review, the job that her and Amy are fighting over, is who gets to go through it, the portal. because clearly it's that Amy and Mina are fighting over this big project, and it looks like it possibly is going to be Amy who has to do it, but with her untimely death, it almost looks like you do it by process of elimination, basically, because your competitor who was going to win dies instead, at the hands of Spider in the last chapter. So yeah, it's a bit of an odd one, really. You're doing this job that you weren't really supposed to, because I think Amy would have beat Mina in light of all the evidence she finds about Hale and Amy kind of against her. But yeah, so it very much tees up into chapter 6 quite well, or into 7 even. Yeah, so what are you expecting with Mina going forward for the finale?
Honestly, to try and presumably find Sam. As far as speculation, in terms of what could happen, other than that, I generally cannot think of anything. And if I'm being honest, as well as it looked like presentation wise, this chapter for Mina, and I'm talking more about when she's in this sort of space facility thing and she's putting the suit on and stuff. I did feel like as a player a bit conned out, because it seems like that they've quickly just tied up all the other threads. It's sort of the gunfight with the drug dealer and Amy. That sort of naturally wraps 2 stories up in one. And obviously, like, you've got the whole domestic thing with her husband and the son. I don't know. I felt as though it felt a bit tacked on, this thing. It's almost as if like Mina's story belongs in a different game to me, and the whole sci-fi thing's just been tacked on to the end of it so that all 3 characters could presumably meet in the green portal later on. So the way it's actually panned out for Mina, it's quite jarring. I feel a little bit underwhelmed, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's fair. I think as well, one of the points I kept mentioning beforehand throughout the series that we've done is that I always felt Mina's story had lack of a core. Donna, you had the stranger, with the wings and stuff, definitely a supernatural magic element. John and Jack, you had the body swap. Mina very much lacked that. It just felt like an adult who had an important job struggling to tackle, her life. And then it almost felt like the core of her story and the substance of it all just piled into this one chapter 6 right at the end. So I felt the pacing that we always mentioned was a detriment to Mina's story, in the sense that they definitely could have given chapters 3 and 4 a lot more attention and love. It felt like they crammed everything, like you say, into the last 2 chapters where they tied up loose ends. And yeah, very much just had to get her in a portal somehow, and they just piled it on very much at the last Mina scene. So definitely something they could have worked on a lot better. The pacing, the timings, and the attention throughout the different chapters. I'm not sure if you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And by the way, mate, like you talked about the achievement before in Amy's flat.
Mm.
Because I was taking her stuff, like I was taking the evidence. I still got the achievement.
Oh, did you? Yes, I have no idea what that whole taking is for. I mean, maybe it's like gone over my memory. Maybe that comes relevant in a later chapter. I actually didn't get the trophy. I got it second time round. I don't know where I went wrong. I probably left like a cupboard open or something small like that. But yeah, definitely a fun little. I wouldn't even call it a mini game, but just sequence, which was a little different because I think the game does, cry out for a bit of variety, and you get it here and there. But yeah, the sequence felt, very welcomed to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, shall we move on to Donna's chapter?
Yeah, we can go on to Donna. It will take us about 2 minutes, but let's do it.
Yeah. So the chapter starts. It's quite clear that a lot of time has passed, and you're starting to see pizza boxes. It's starting to look untidy. stuff is slowly starting to get removed from Donna's flat, and then it ends on this shot with Donna on her own. So you sort of sussed at this point that the stranger's clearly just been removing everyone from her life. And the chapter essentially runs with Donna waking up, and the stranger says, we need to go home, which I think's interesting because I'm assuming he's referring to the green portal as home for him, but I'm gonna keep the whole relative, maybe him being her dad or secret brother or something like that. I don't know, as an option, because he does seem to have some sort of affection for Donna in some way, and I suppose that's emphasised in when they're in the flat and then they're slowly descending down into the portal, like they are sort of in like an embrace, and you've got all these characters that you sort of met in Donna's chapter hating on her a bit, which I suppose you could say is understandable, because if it wasn't for her falling over and what's the word, encouraging, I suppose, this stranger, then none of this would have happened. So but yeah, that's essentially how it ends. They go into this green light and it cuts to black.
So I'm just going to go through. I'm looking at the scene right now, and you definitely sort of see some of the various characters, such as Vivek, Ash, Emma, who, like you say, it's clear that she's been kind of taken this chapter. So I'm going to quote some of the things that they read as you descend. So Ash says, "You were always such a child." Emma says, "I wonder how many people would be better off if you weren't here." Tamara says, "Why didn't you see me in the hospital?" I guess this is the mum. Vivek, "Donna, I lied. I was with Becky that night."
Yeah.
Becky says, "We did it in the bathroom."
Right.
And Donna says, "Who are they? They seem to know me." Now, I'm not sure if this is, the truth or not, because, there are a few explanations there, such as, how do I say it? Vivek and Becky saying that they did it at the party. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think this is all false, and this is what the stranger's creating. Because I don't think that the people would know much about what Donna's done, the link with the stranger. For example, someone like Vivek would have just, been roped into it without knowing that Donna and the stranger were talking. Ash saying stuff like, "You were always such a child." That was never really Ash's personality or opinion. She very much wanted to side to you. She kind of felt empathy with you. I almost think Vivek has a good heart, and I don't really buy into the fact that he would kind of, do the deed with Becky and then go straight to Donna to try. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think the strangers concocted this to get into Donna's head to possibly, I don't know, further capture her, for her to only be his, if you know what I mean. He's clearly got this obsession and, erases people around her to be the only character in her life out of jealousy or whatever it is. And I think this is a further toxic maneuver to pull that off by sort of saying, "Oh, the people that you love don't want you. You've sort of ruined it with them." So yeah, I don't know what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, that's definitely how I interpreted it. Obviously, for a split second, like when you're sort of like listening to the characters and stuff, you're sort of thinking, could it be that they're mad that they sort of know that it's Donna's fault that they are where they are? But I think you're absolutely right that it's definitely the stranger, because that seems to be just what he's been doing from the get-go. He's only been talking to her, which I suppose probably sort of made her feel special in a way, because he wasn't talking to Becky and Vivek, and obviously that's then slowly manifested itself in him taking people out of her life. So I completely buy that, and yeah, that's how I'd interpret it, mate.
Obviously there's not much to cover in the Donna chapter. It just kind of ties it. Like I get. We're also going to cover how John's chapter slightly rushed this one. But somehow it's still even a little longer than Donna's. So I always sort of felt, at least Mina, who had short chapters, tried to compensate in the end by giving us a big lengthy part. Donna's didn't do that. It almost, I was waiting for it to say more and it never did. It just kind of concluded to get into this finale with the portal. But one thing I will say, and this is a point I wanted to make in a previous chapter, a theory I had, but I couldn't say it because you didn't know as much as you do now. But while it's a short chapter, now seems like a good as time as any to say it. You know that random sequence in, I believe it's chapter 3 or 4 maybe, where you walk back with Becky and you're falling out because Vivek seems to be erased, and Becky leaves you. You're with the stranger. And I think there's that random basement sequence where there's just this random jump scare that doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have a feeling that this was him erasing Becky from your life, because this is the last moment we see Becky. I think maybe the stranger doesn't like the fact of how she talked to you as the stranger witnessed it. But yeah, she goes from just you not seeing her again to her being in this portal at the end where clearly she's taken amongst the likes of your mum and Vivek and Ash. So yeah, I don't know if that is like a very accurate opinion because I don't think there's a real answer afterwards. It kind of just happens. But yeah, I guess to me it just makes sense that that whole jump scare is him distracting you while the stranger claims Becky.
It could well be. It could well be because I suppose what the thing that puzzled me was that he sort of encourages you to go to the basement, and then it looks like he's following you, and then he sees himself in a photo, and then he backs off. So yeah, you could be right. It could literally just be like he sort of used that moment to go and get Becky. But I mean, I was always hoping that it would go somewhere, maybe in the finale, and that it would sort of explain itself. But if it doesn't, then I suppose all we can do is sort of sit here and guess, or failing that, if maybe like someone else out there knows what's sort of going on from that particular basement scene. And, obviously, if you do leave a comment, it'd be appreciated because that's something that has stayed with me, and I don't quite know what it's all about.
It's very true. So obviously, there's 3 characters where we see them get claimed, such as I think it's Vivek, the mother Tamara, as well as Ash. With Emma and Becky, it's a lot more ambiguous. Like we don't really know how they got claimed. Like Emma's picture gets erased, and then you see her in the portal. And as for Becky, there's just no explanation other than that scene I just mentioned, which is a possible factor, but it's not one that's set in stone. And I'm guessing all the other characters you see in the background are the ones that the stranger has supposedly been taken back at the start. So I guess you're going to find out later in the next chapter if there's a reason he's doing this, because it seems like he was doing it long before he even found Becky. So we'll explore more about that avenue in the next chapter, I guess. But yeah, so that was Donna. Are you happy to talk about John, or did you have any additional points with Donna?
Yeah, we'll move on to John then. Again, as I said before, a very short chapter, not much longer than Donna's, and you start off in the hospital, and you essentially, the nurse comes in and says he might not make it through the night, and it's definitely throws up some sort of interesting scenarios and I suppose moral questions moving forward, because even Molly raises it. She sort of says, if it wasn't for the body swap, like that would have been John. Like it's not fair, sort of thing. But then, as John and Jack's body, let's say if there was an opportunity to swap back, and this is where I suppose my theory from the last episode will come in. If there is a binary choice, I feel like this is going to be it essentially. Is that would he want to leave Molly fatherless in order for Jack to live, who he's only known for a little while because he's a neighbour? So I mean, and then going on from there, he gets a text from the Vape Lord, and he goes and sees him, and he says, we're good to go essentially for seeing Frank. And you go down round the back of the shop, down this little sort of a lift, and then he opens this door and a bang, there's a green portal there. And I think the ending to this one was the most interesting for me, because he gives you 2 tokens, and as soon as this happened, as soon as he said 1 in, 1 out, I thought, right, something's going to go wrong, and he's going to end up only having 1, and maybe in the finale you have a choice of like who you give it to go, to go back to the, sort of the real world. But as it happens, the door shuts, the Vape Lord goes to walk off, and then there's 1 token that sort of bounces on the floor. So how I read that was that somehow John has dropped 1 of the tokens, so he's only going to get 1 trip. Whether that's, it could be a red herring, I don't know, but it's not looking good for John at the moment, I must say, and it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out for sure.
I actually totally forgot about the token element, and it begs the question as well, how comes, I mean, I guess, Mina went through with an unsolicited visit, and Donna's almost a +1 with someone who's possibly from this world, which is why they probably don't have tokens. But yeah, very interesting story. And I think John's ending, it's very short and sweet, but like you say, it just it kind of highlights that moral question a lot more. If you were John and Jack's body here, what would you do? Would you, because you've obviously got the better end of the stick, you've got the better body, and then the person who's younger than you, who goes into your unfit body, then has all these problems, and it's like, there's definitely a moral thing, but like you say, you almost think you would do it in a heartbeat, you would switch back because it's unfair, but you raise a very good point there. Like, there's a child at stake as well. Like, would that mean she's fatherless? So it is very interesting, and I'm not going to say more until obviously we go into the next chapter. But yeah, one thing I wanted to cover is that obviously all 3 characters have ended up in the portal. So chapter 7 is very much going to be about the other side. The game's done something which is quite bold, but something I quite like, and it's that it's not really dropped you many hints of what is on the other side. Just the fact that there's green portals, you need tokens, and we know a character from there in the Stranger from Donna's chapter. Do you have any sort of imagery or, ideas of what you reckon is going to be on the other side of these portals, mate?
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. And I don't know whether I like that or not, because I like sort of getting little clues here or there. And you know what? If you go there and then, I don't know, it'd be a little bit of spoon feeding on the game's part, but if I then sort of went back and later on in the game there were little hints, I'd appreciate it a lot more. I think I'm just like that I like the fact that there's little things to find, but at the same time, it does add a whole lot of mystery as to what is over there. Obviously, you saw the bodies in Donna's story; they didn't quite make it. They were just sort of floating round in the space that sort of surrounds them as they were going down. But yeah, I've honestly not got a clue what's going to be there, and we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. And I don't want to say too much either, because I reckon the next chapter we talk about is going to be a much bigger one, where we talk about all the theories and your reactions to it. Because yeah, it's obviously very different. We're gonna leave London per se, the world as we know it, which is like very much where the whole game has been set. So it's gonna just be a very different experience for you. But yeah, there's not much to say for this chapter. It's very much the tying up some loose ends, or not. Very briefly, with just this conclusion to get them through the portal for the end of the game, where I don't want to say too much about playability, but do you have a feeling whether any thoughts about who you're going to play as in the final chapter? If it's going to be a bit like a part one for each person again?
That's what I assume it to be. I assume that, because I think we looked it up, right, that it's going to be like a 45-minute-ish run through for the final part. So if I had to guess, it would be, yeah, roughly 15 minutes each, and that each one would finish with a choice, because obviously we discussed in the last one that there is a choice, sort of one way or the other, as to how you're going to end each character's story. That's how I reckon it will play out. But as to what you do for the 15 minutes, in the lead up to that choice, I'm completely in the dark, really.
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, to be honest, the only thing to do is for you to finish the game, mate, and then us summarize and analyze our thoughts on it. But yeah, so are you happy to wrap it up there?
I guess so. I mean, I'm going to make a couple of predictions.
Yeah, go for it.
But just to wrap up, so obviously I know that there are choices coming, and it will sort of really determine the end of the story. Now, you're probably aware by now what I think how John's story is going to go. I think that you'll get to the point where you will be given the choice of whether you swap bodies back or not. And I suppose as well, like sort of going back to something Molly said in this chapter as well, is that if you do swap bodies back, not only will she be fatherless, but there's no guarantee that Jack would be able to look after her. Like social services could get involved. So like she could be, sort of her whole life could go upside down. But obviously, if you stay in Jack's body, then you've let someone innocent die, essentially, and you have to sort of hold that onto your conscience. That's how
Yeah,
I
and I think, like I've always voiced, Molly being my favorite character. I think it's quite genius of the game actually making Molly this absolutely fantastic character, this really adorable girl that it makes the decision 10 times harder, right? That you don't want to jeopardize that for her.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's sort of, I mean, I know this sort of, it's, not directly related, but you know how, like, in the Walking Dead games, you play as Lee and you're, like, looking after Clementine. And even when you play as Clementine and you're looking after AJ in, like, the Walking Dead series, um, you feel like sort of as that player, sort of like you're bringing them up in this world, you're sort of teaching them, showing them the ropes, and you're ultimately responsible for them. So to put the player in that position, you're really putting it between a rock and a hard place. So if that is how it goes, then it'll be interesting to see what I pick, because it will be a hard one either way.
Yeah, of course. So I guess we'll go on for Mina. Did you have any predictions for what her final choice could be or how her story's gonna finalize?
Yeah, see, you know what? Before playing this episode, I thought it was going to be a case of it could be something basic like, do you go off with Felix or do you go off with Dan? Um, but I don't know, there's been definitely a thing in her arc about being selfish and ill-disciplined and people not really liking to her. So you could have a choice where you could carry on that mantra, or you could do something completely selfless and help someone get out and maybe trap yourself. And maybe the real tragedy is that when she said to Dan, I'm going to be gone for a while, that's the last conversation they're ever going to have, and maybe she
Yeah.
helped someone get out. So that's what I'll roll with for Mina. And then as far as Donna goes, wow, it's actually quite tough in terms of like a straight up binary choice. It could be that almost something similar where like she somehow saves everyone that's been erased, but as a sacrifice, she has to stay behind. I really don't know. feel like the John one, because it's a body swap. It's so much easier to sort of come up with something. But yeah, I'll roll with that in the meantime. But obviously, what I'll do if while I'm away from it and I think about it, I come up with something, I will text you it, and then at the start of the next episode, we'll sort of we'll update, the listener as to what my current thoughts are. But yeah, that's what I'll go with.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I think you're being a bit too optimistic because we all know the final choice is going to be should you wear your yellow stripy shirt or your green jumper?
It's funny, like when I was rooting through Amy's flat, I was thinking, oh, she's got a nice few blazers there, Mina. Maybe you want to take a couple.
The whole reason Hale was going to pick her over Mina was her dress sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that's brilliant. Some really good thoughts by you, to be honest. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think the next episode's going to be a lot beefier because we'll talk about the choice elements as well as the moralities and conclusions of what we thought about the story, whether it was worth it getting there. So yeah, to be honest, I'm happy to wrap it up there if you are.
Yeah, same here, mate.
So yeah, obviously in the comments, let us know what you think of the series. If you sort of came to similar conclusions, such as Hale being Peter from the start, and what you thought about the choices going into this game, and if another point as well, which should be interesting, is what you suspected, going into the portal, what you thought would be on the other side. Because yeah, it does get very interesting. Chapter 7's definitely an odd one to look at. So yeah, I'm happy to wrap it up there. Thank you very much for listening if you got this far. And I guess, yeah, we'll see you for the finale of The Last Stop.
Yeah, see you on the other side.
All right, cheers, guys. See you then.
All right, and welcome back to another episode of
The Butterfly Effect Podcast.
Brought to you by Harvey's Razors, the closest killer shaver man can get. Now, before we get into today's topic, remember to share this video with your friends and smash that like button.